Hello, guys. Welcome to Side Minds. It's been a while. Well, we are reading In Therapy by Susie Orbach, Case of Joe, page number 125, first session. Joe is in her 30s. It is her first session. She bounces in, lively and nervy. She sent me an email requesting therapy, saying only that she had gone off track. She acts with an unusual mixture of nonchalance and diffidence as she enters the room. She has a London accent and an expressive face, which is engaging. She speaks at a great pace. Joe. Hi. Susie. Hello, I'm Susie. Joe. I'm Joe. Am I really late? I'm so sorry. It's just that I think you gave me the wrong address and I don't normally get stuff like that wrong, which is why I'm late and I think I have now wasted like 15 minutes or something. Susie. Come in. Just go straight ahead. I'm really sorry. It would be a bit unusual. Joe. Is it in here? Susie. Yes, would you like to take a seat on the sofa? Joe. Yeah, oh god, I did not want to start it like this. I didn't want to come in as a wreck. It's just one of those days where everything goes wrong. Susie. Uh huh. Joe. Anyway, when I meet someone for the first time, I'm really interested to hear what they have to say and how they say it. I notice the pauses, the way their voice gets louder. I notice their physical being and I notice their impact on me. We learn a surprising amount in a first encounter about the themes an individual is struggling with and how their mind has construed their situation in such a way that they can't find exit points for their difficulty. As we listen, we are assessing whether we believe we will be able to be of use to them. Therapy is not for everyone. Sometimes just a single session will be helpful. What is said in a first session does not become set in stone. The content will shift or something unbidden may emerge in session 20. But how the individual frames her or his dilemmas will be the opening guide. Joe is late and she says she has been given the wrong address. I know something has gone awry here because she received my correct address by email, so I am alert to what those two things might tell us about Joe's way of being in the world and being with herself. Joe comes in a bit flustered, breathy, and busy, and my ears are open to hear how she gets in the way of herself. Susie. So tell me. Joe. Yeah, I guess I'm here because I'm unhappy. I'm an actress. Well, God, I say I'm an actress. I'm not an actress because I work in a cafe. I was an actress. I was a successful actress at a certain level, but I haven't had any work for ages. Anyway, my drama school is having the big 10-year reunion. Susie. Uh huh. Joe. Tonight. But the thing is, it is happening in the club where I work, and I have to work because I need the money and they are short staffed. And I have obviously known about it for a few weeks, and I can just feel it getting worse and worse as it gets nearer and nearer, and now it's today. Susie. Uh huh. Joe. And I'm not in any position that I thought I would be. And an ex boyfriend of mine, he really, if I'm honest, really was the only person who actually understood me. He's going to be there, and I haven't seen him for 10 years. I haven't really had anything, a relationship that even comes close to that. You know, because I'm the one that finished it, everything is drained for me, from me. I don't know. I don't even know why I'm here because the fact is, I feel ridiculous now, sat here having just got upset about an ex boyfriend. Oh, I feel slightly uncomfortable. Susie. Uh huh. Joe. If I'm honest right now, because I don't, oh, I feel ridiculous. Well, Susie. Well, it can feel a bit ridiculous because you are talking to a complete stranger and trying to give me a picture of the things that concern you. Joe. Yeah. I am listening to Joe and I am torn as to what to say to her. I register her panic, her words stumble out, and tracking what's particularly important for her, whether it's the ex boyfriend or the disappointment in her acting career or some quite other focus, is going to take a while. Her voice is like a screech and then she halts. I'm interested in why she was unable to swap her shift, which is a very ordinary thing to do when you are feeling under pressure. But she wasn't able to think that or make the change. And so I'm wondering if she is revealing something about the way she inadvertently traps herself. I feel the intensity of the clamp around Joe's mind. The trap provokes me to think about whether she lives in a story of no exit or believing she will be the victim, that she will be abject. When in doubt, a psychotherapist has to keep their mouth shut. The point of therapy is to see something unfold, see how something unfolds. I need to notice the shifts in the emotional temperature as she recounts her story. I am pulled, just as Jo is, into the tension she feels about swapping the shift, or rather, her not being able to. Seeing her classmates and not feeling successful, seeing the ex boyfriend, and I need to wait to hold on to all of these themes so I can be of use to her. Jo. And I don't want people's pity at this reunion tonight, which I know they are going to feel because I see it all the time in people's faces. You can see it. Susie, you see pity or you see compassion? You interpret it as pity. Is it pity? Joe, maybe, yeah, I don't. Maybe I'm projecting them onto them. I don't know. Sighs. I am nudging Joe a little bit here to see whether she has any emotional bandwidth. Joe has used the word projection, which is quite useful. It gives me a sense that she might understand that what she thinks and imagines isn't always the case, and that she may misinterpret what other people are feeling because of her own difficult feelings about her work life. Her disposition is cheery, highly strung, and anxious, all at the same time. I feel her slipping between various emotional states within a millisecond. This presumably is her style and I need to respect it, but I also want to find a way to slow her down. Susie, I suppose the important thing for us is to figure out how you feel about this. Joe, I am scared where I will end up. I know I keep things about the morning that we broke up. We just parted and it wasn't horrible. It wasn't in any way. Nobody did anything actually wrong. Susie, uh huh. Joe, and I just let it go. I can remember it so clearly. I watched him walk away, and actually, if I'm honest, he's the only person that I shared true intimacy with, and I don't know why I gave up on it so easily. Just in a few sentences, Jo has slowed down and moved into a reflective space. She is now looking at me intently. The pace of her words has changed, and I am feeling that I might be able to be of some help. My question, which follows, may seem rather hackneyed, as it diverts her attention to her earlier life. It comes out of full stop she seems to have arrived at. I could have waited and not said anything, but I was mindful that we only had a very short session and I needed to see what to recommend. She has had the thought that she gave up on the relationship on him so easily many times and is as perplexed now as she was 10 years ago. Susie, and when you think of loss, did you have earlier losses in your life? Joe, not really. I don't think so. Not that I can. We are back to another full stop. Susie, tell me a bit about your background. Joe, well, I don't really know my dad, and I didn't know him. Susie, is that your phone? Joe, oh god, sorry. Susie, would you mind turning it off? Thank you. Joe, hold on a second. Oh, I've got to answer this quickly. I'm really sorry. Hello, I'm just at a meeting actually. Okay, okay, I'll be there in 10. I'm really sorry. I'm just around the corner. Is it okay if I keep my phone on? Susie, no, I'm afraid it isn't because I can't really concentrate and we have got such a very short time together and I would really like. Joe, I'm sorry. The moment was lost with her and we are sent in a different direction. One that might be very helpful to us to understand as the therapy continues. We have just talked about the humiliation of the reunion, the loss of the boyfriend, and the fact that she didn't know her dad. And I'm linking those things in my mind as a possibility, but before I can think about those connections and whether they are relevant, and certainly before she can feel anything about them, we are off on a train in a completely different direction. Joe, I'm sorry because now I have completely forgotten what we were talking about. Susie, uh, Joe, I'm not very good at this sort of things. Is there a right way to do it? Susie, no. Joe, okay. Susie, we just have to get to know each other. Joe, okay, yep. Susie, something like you to be in touch. Joe, yeah, my friend who comes to be you suggested it might be a good idea. I think I think actually he was just bored of listening to me on going on about how awful my life is, so he just suggested that I come in and pay somebody else to listen to me talk. Sorry, I'm just talking too much actually. I guess that's the point, isn't it? But yeah, Susie, if I'm seeing your friend, I wouldn't be able to see you. I am nonplussed about this information as I usually know how an individual has come to me, and I fear I was a little harsh in rushing to say that I wouldn't be able to see her. I wouldn't, but I wish I could have said it more gently. If I examine myself as to why I was so hasty, I think it is probably because the session has been quite challenging so far. With us having so little time and the disruption of the phone, I was too hurried to manage this third piece of awkward information better. Joe. Oh, Susie. But I would be able to think about who might be right and recommend them to you. Joe. Oh, okay. But the thing is, I haven't even. Sigh. I haven't even told you his name. I feel like maybe. I feel like you just don't want to see me. I know you have. I have just wasted however much money coming here, and it kind of feels like you are dumping me. Like I've just, I've just told you what I have got to say, and I've got to go and do tonight. Why would you choose to say something like that? Susie, it's really unfortunate that I didn't know. You knew, of course, but you didn't know that it would preclude me seeing you. Joe, well, shall we call it a day then? Susie, no, sit please. Joe, I mean, there's no point going on, is there really? Susie, Joe, please sit down because it's not. There's things that we are in the middle of that I think it is quite worth us trying to just hold on to. Joe, this is just so typical. This is really typical my life because I can't. Susie, okay, so that's what's very useful for us, isn't it? If it is typical that something doesn't go as you wish, you have been bold enough to show me what doesn't work, and I would like to think about who would be the right therapist for you. Joe, but why wouldn't you be the right therapist? Susie, I might be the right therapist, of course, I might be the right therapist. I might be very interested to be. Joe, it just feels like you're fobbing me off to somebody else. Susie, uh huh. Joe, which I wasn't expecting. Wasn't expecting this. Susie, no, I can see that. I can see that it's definitely not what you would have wished, but I think maybe in your jumping to the idea of why I'm doing it and discounting what I'm actually saying by making up a different story to yourself, it is inadvertently hurting you. Because actually, this isn't about you. It is really about me. It's about me. It's about how I work and the kind of rules or ethics that govern my job. Even though the impact is hurtful for you, it's not about who you are and how it pleases or displeases me. Joe is quite understandably projecting onto me a rejection. This echoes the earlier moment when she imagines her classmates pitying her. It is important to give her the reality here so that she can take back the worry that is all about how pitiful she is. It's very interesting when the problem the individual has in part talked about comes alive in a therapy session. Joe is talking about rejection, and I find myself bounced into rejecting her. I feel this acutely. Worse, I can't even repair it for her properly, and so I have caused her hurt and added to her chaos. I don't want to have an abrupt ending with Joe. She's had an abrupt ending with the boyfriend from 10 years ago, and I'm imagining that her father disappeared when she was very little, although I don't have any confirmation of this. I do know that I can be of use to her if I'm seeing her friend. Hearing about her through someone else's eyes or seeing her friend through her eyes isn't really the point. Therapy is a sealed environment. We aim to hear things firsthand and then assess them with the person concerned. We look for the discordances rather than hearing them elsewhere. It's not perfect because people are not always reliable reporters of their own behavior, but we do need to see things from their perspective as we add in ours. Knowing something from someone else does influence one, and although that can be useful, it can also be distorting. Such rules were hard learned through years of experience in the psychoanalytic journey. Initially, Freud and his followers saw people who were friends and colleagues and holidayed with some of them. But as psychoanalysis became a mainstream practice in the United States after the Second World War, There was enough accumulated experience to see that friendships weren't the wisest of structures for a practice. It made it all a bit too cozy and sometimes rather muddled. It's not practicable in today's world to know nothing of one's patient other than what they show and tell. The internet has put paid to that. Then, too, they have information about their chosen practitioner. Indeed, they may well have researched you before they approach you. They can know a great deal more about the therapist than what the therapist show of her or himself through their demeanor in the consulting room. A therapist might be asked, for example, how her daughter enjoys such and such a college, the patient having discovered through a couple of clicks what university the therapist's daughter has attended. When such information is brought to the therapy, it can have a significance beyond the simple inquiry. The therapist might be interested in why this particular patient has asked this of her, and as she inquires about it, the patient might be flummoxed. The question was for her part innocent. When I say it has a significance, I'm not implying that this is misbehavior or inappropriate on the analysand's part. I'm signaling rather that it can become an additional form of communication in the therapy relationship. A query about a daughter's college could mean any number of things, from the patient's straightforward interest to anxiety to a wish to see the therapist's private life as a guide for her or himself, to a need to show that her or his daughter is doing well, and everything in between. It can sound precious to say we are interested in exploring such questions for what they yield about the patient's inner world. But if used judicially, such an interchange can be productive. But back to Jo, from whom such questions are hardly on the table. She got in touch without knowing that my seeing her friend would preclude my taking her on for therapy. She knew my name from him, and as it turned out, had found my details through the internet. For her, this was an act of responsibility. She looked me up and found out how to contact me. She didn't know what my rules were. My intention now is to find a way of moving her to somebody else if she decides to pursue therapy. I hope she will be able to do this, and that our encounter won't sit as another cutoff where she falls through the cracks. Jo. So, well, what do we do now? Susie. Well, what I would like to do is see you again for a full session and see whether you actually want to pursue therapy, and for me to see who comes up in my own mind that I think would be good for you. Jo. Yeah, I'm not sure that I do want to pursue therapy. Susie. That's understandable, but perhaps the idea will sit with you. Jo. I guess I need to think about it. I don't want to make any big decisions, but because that's what's got me in trouble. Thank you. Susie. Okay. Jo. And I'll be in touch. Susie. Okay. Jo. Alright, thanks. Jo has had a difficult first session and she has a tricky night to navigate. Despite our difficult meeting, I hope that she will be back for a proper assessment and referral. A therapist of no matter how much experience cannot predict how the words that are said in a session will settle in. It is one of the peculiarities of the analytic encounter. The psychotherapist puts her or himself out to try to understand the dilemmas the other is grappling with, but we can't know which words, certainly not in early sessions, will resonate. Individuals and couples come to their ensuing session having found something illuminating that the therapist may not have noticed had much salience. We can't always calibrate things. The therapist is always increasing and revising her or his knowledge and understanding of the person and the way they receive the words shared in the session. This is not to say that the therapist doesn't know what she is doing. Of course not. It is to say that the human psyche is intricate, surprising, and that while consciously things may make sense, the more unconscious processes are also in train and do not reveal themselves in a logical sequence. Second session. It's 6 months later, and Jo has come for a referral. Jo. Hello, Susie, it's Jo. Susie. Come on up. Jo. Thanks. Susie. Hello, Jo. Come on in. Jo. Hi, thanks. How are you? Susie. Good, thank you. Jo. Thank you for seeing me. Yeah, I guess my memory of the last time that we met, I wasn't entirely, I don't think, ready for what this is actually. And I think I had so much on my mind at the time, and my memory of it is quite blurred. Susie. Uh-huh. Jo. Susie. And also, you were very thrown by the fact that I wasn't in a position to see you. Joe. Yeah. Susie. And you were facing the reunion? Joe. Yes. Susie. And your ex partner? Joe. Yes, yes, yes. And I think that at the time I was feeling quite vulnerable, and I think I reacted quite strongly. And I guess I would like to kind of start again. But also, you did say that you could refer me to somebody. Susie. Yeah, of course. Let me listen. Let us talk and let's see what's what. Joe. Okay, what it is that things have got considerably worse since the last time that you saw me. I don't have a job anymore. I was sacked, to be honest. And you could say that I'm homeless. Susie. Uh huh. Joe. And what is difficult is that the homeless that I know about are people living on streets holding paper cups, but yet I am actually homeless even though I don't look like I am. So at the moment, I've been flat sitting for some very successful friends who have been out in LA and they come back tomorrow, sorry, next week, and I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have a home, so I don't have a base, and I have been sort of so far happening, so far hoping. Susie. Uh-huh. Joe. And it's sort of beginning to make me feel slightly like I'm being left behind in general, because I feel like everything I've worked for, whether it be waitressing or whether it be acting, is it hasn't actually done any good. I live in a world where most of my friends have a home, they have children, they have a partner, they have this setup. Susie. Uh huh. Joe. Which is a setup that we are led to believe is what you want in life. That's what you work for, that's what you strive for, and I am overwhelmingly aware that I don't have any of those, and I don't know whether it is my fault. I don't know whether I have brought it upon myself. What's impressing me about Jo today is the sadness she feels, which is quite a move away from the fraught, on edge place she was in when I met her the first time. The seriousness she feels about her circumstances will stand her in good stead because it brings her closer to an important reality. It means there is less of a screen between herself and any capacities she might be able to draw on to get herself out of a difficult situation. Susie. Uh huh. Joe. People say that luck is huge part of everything, especially in the career that I've chosen and I'm trying to have, and I feel like I need to stop and look at myself and change something because I'm getting very cynical about everything because I can't really see a way out of my situation, which is why I think I need help, and yet I don't have the money in order to get help. I don't know whether you can suggest anywhere to go, anyone to talk to that will listen to me or help me on the route to helping myself, I guess, because I have just reached a point where I don't know where else to go and I don't know how to help myself. Susie. I am hesitating because I don't think money for therapy is the unsurmountable problem. There are a few places or people that I might be able to match you up with. So tell me a bit more about the isolation and the fear that you are living with at the moment. Joe. Well, because I don't have any money to pay rent, my friends are saying, oh, you can sleep on my sofa, and I kind of can't keep doing that because I'm not a child anymore. And these are people my own age. These are friends of mine who have the basics. I don't even have the basics. So I feel like I'm floundering and I don't know whether it is my fault that I've created my own destiny. Susie. Well, fault is a funny word, isn't it? I want to lift off the notion of fault for the moment. I'm not advocating a denial of responsibility. The complex manner in which our personal history and circumstances fetch us up in a particular situation they do are important and need to be addressed. But fault in this bit of a therapy dialogue would seem to operate as a clamp, shutting down what we need to look at in this assessment. Joe. Yeah. Susie. Because you are in a very tough spot, and the question is how you are going to find a way through if you don't get a lucky break. Joe. Yeah, and I feel like that has got so much to do with the industry that I'm in. Susie. Exactly. So that is the real situation. But I'm not sure if it's helpful for fall to dominate the conversation. I think we should see a little bit what you feel your capacities are that you are not able to use at the moment. I think the very fact that you are flat sitting is probably a much safer situation than perching on somebody's sofa. Joe. Yes, although that is going to come to an end. Susie. I know, but that is a wave that some people manage in the periods they have difficulty. They become the person who flat sits. Joe, I'm also aware that it is not my existence that I'm living. Susie, yes. Joe, it's not my. Susie, home, yes. Joe, home. It's not my £1 million home. I mean, I'm literally a guest. Susie, yes, but you are providing a service, and painful as it may be to see the gap between what your friends have been able to put together and how the cookie has crumbled for you, if you could get something in the short term, another place to stay, you can look at the possibilities there are for you as somebody who is a skilled actor who hasn't been able to find work of late and doesn't quite know what to do with that difficulty, and all the things that bubble up inside of you can be spoken and thought about. I'm picking up on Joe's anxiety, and before she goes into full tilt, but without coming up with a fake solution, I want to convey to her a temporary calm place, such as another home sit, to do some thinking from, which is what I'm implying in using the phrase that she is providing a service. Joe. Yeah, I feel like I'm living with an increasing anxiety about not only now, but the future. Have I made bad choices? Have I brought this on myself? Susie. Let's just explore that for a moment. What are the sort of things that run through your mind when you say, have I brought this on myself? Did I make bad choices? Joe. Well, I feel like anyone who has ever shown genuine care for me and love for me, I have sort of pushed them away. Susie. And would you say that was true not just with your boyfriend? Would you say that was true with directors that you have worked with? Joe. Possibly. Susie. Can you think about that a little bit more? Because a director is looking after a play. Joe. Yeah. Susie. And is also like the head of a family. Joe. Yeah, something that I have been drawn into my life is the experience of being in that family, but that family will come to an end, and that family is everything to you. But a year or so, that family does not exist, and yet everyone, nearly everyone I know, they have a family. They have their own family. A few years down the line, you are not part of that director's family anymore because that director has moved on, or the other actors that you worked with. Susie. Yes, you have a very intense experience, and then it stays with you, and then it diminishes, doesn't it? Joe. Yeah. Susie. Or it doesn't join up unless you work with those actors again? Joe. But it's not real life. I'm always intrigued when people talk about work as not real life. Work, if we are very lucky, can be engrossing. Of course, for many, it can be deadening. But thinking about Joe's work as an actor, it was very real. There, she found multiple relationships and encounters, demands, difficulties, triumphs, and boring bits. Work is where many people thrive, and I sense that it is where Joe felt most fulfilled. Susie. Well, it was real life. Let me ask you this because I'm not sure if this is what you are hinting at. Do you think that your engagement with the director has been in any way dismissive? Or have you thrown any of that away when you question whether you have brought it on yourself? Joe. No, I don't think that's the case. I think it is more to do with relationships I have had. Susie. Relationships inside the theatre or relationships outside? Joe. In real life, in my life, like theatre and what I do is everything to me, but when you go home at night, Susie. Yeah, but how do you understand that you are not working? I know it's chance if you do or don't get picked for a role, so I would like to divide this into two. Joe. Oh, I see what you're talking about. Susie. Because you have said a couple of times, I'm fearful that I have brought this on myself. Joe. Well, yes, because I don't know how I have reached at this point in my life where I have nothing, and I want to change that. Susie. Part of the not having is the not working. So, all I'm trying to understand, and I could be barking completely up the wrong tree, but do you feel, if you reflect on it, that when you have pushed people away, people who are caring, I know it is a very precious relationship or an intimate or a powerful relationship that a director and the players have, is there something you feel you have done to prevent the director coming towards you again? Joe. Not that I can think of. Susie. Okay. Joe. Yeah. Susie. So it doesn't feel like that at all. It feels like in your world outside of the theatre. Joe. I mean, of course, I have other questions like, have I gone about the whole thing in completely the wrong way in not thinking about the industry as a business? I have never come at it from that viewpoint, and so I have done some great work, and I'm proud of the work that I've done. But how is it that I have worked for so long and I have got nothing to show for it? Susie, you mean that the work has dried up and you are homeless? Joe, yeah, should I have gone about it? Susie, how? Joe, I don't know, have a different personality because I can't help but compare myself to everyone, around me, and also the idea of having no money, the idea of being skinned. You go on social media, on Instagram or whatever, and one minute you are having a conversation with someone who is agreeing with you and going, oh yeah, like I'm super skinned, I'm really skinned, and then 2 days later they're posting photos of them in Barbados on holiday, and I'm just like, well, I would like to be that sort of skin, please. Because if you are skin, then what am I? Because I don't come from money. My parents don't have anything to give me. I guess I'm just feeling very cynical about the whole thing, and I don't want to. I want something to change, and I don't know whether it's, for example, I expected the reunion to go badly, and it did go badly. Susie, which meant that you couldn't come forward. You couldn't be playful with people. Joe, I spent most of the time hiding in the toilet or smoking outside for something to do. I don't even smoke, but I did. I did feel the pity. I felt the pity. I don't know whether I expected it. So then I brought it on. This whole thing about what you think and you think it into happening. I think that is what I mean by have I brought this on myself. And Susie, so did it mean that you didn't have any space to think after the reunion? I would really like to see X and go for a coffee with them, or I couldn't manage it that night because I was working and it was embarrassing for me. Was there no desire to pursue anybody? Joe. No, I felt like I was moving in the wrong world. I don't know where, if anywhere, I can be belong. Susie. That's really tough. Joe. I feel like I'm completely isolated from even my friends that I've known. I feel like they are miles ahead of me in everything, miles ahead of me in life. In the industry, I do feel like I'm being left behind, but I'm sick of feeling like that and I want to change it. But I don't know how to change it, which is why I'm here. Susie. Uh huh. Joe. And I'm ready to change it. I'm ready to rethink things but I need some help doing it because also I don't feel like I've been like this. I've always been like this. I feel like everything is getting on top of me. I know it's a cliche, but that's how I feel, and I'm slowly removing myself from a world that I thought I belonged in, and now I don't feel like I belong in it at all. Susie, I don't want to play say platitudes, but you are in a world that is very difficult and a world in which a lot of people feel insecure and have infrequent work. But your difficulty is you don't feel you have got a purchase on that world now. Joe, I feel like I did, or had the help that I did. Susie, so do you understand when you feel you were a part of it, what that was like and how or why it went wrong? Joe, now it just feels like it was another life, or it was another me. Susie, uh huh. Joe, or I've lost who I was. Susie, uh huh. Joe, and I've lost my love for life and or my Susie. Well, I think if you feel tipped out, Joe, yeah. Susie, that is an accurate feeling which is really difficult. Joe, yeah, but I guess I want to do something about it. Susie, uh huh. Joe, and I want to learn. I want to feel those things again of like joy. I don't think I've felt joy. Susie, from your perspective, Joe, what's the story you have in your head? Because you have got a big story, which is, am I a part of causing this? But what is the actuality of that? Can you say? Can you tell me your last couple of roles and how you feed off the things you love? Joe, oh God, I mean, Susie, what they were, what they meant to you. What was the feeling in acting them and your engagement with whoever you were playing or with the director? Joe, it's been so long. I feel like there's part of me that's very scared to remember that because I don't have it. So I'm scared to remember how good it was because my life is not that now. I'm trying to slow Joe down and attempting to move her away from two ideas that there is only depression or joy, horror or ecstasy. There are a lot of steps between being desperate and getting to neutral and being able to have ordinary pleasures in your accomplishments with your friends or your work or nature. When Jo left the stage, I have the sense that it was understandably hard for her to manage that disappointment. If she could, and if she now can accept the disappointment, she would in time be able to hook up with her energy and capacities rather than going to the grand dramas of joy or depression. Susie, yes, I'm not guessing this. I'm not suggesting this to make you delusional. I just want to understand when you say, did I cause part of this, leaving aside chance, which is really big? Joe. But in my, it's not really just about the, it's not just about acting, it's about my life in general. Reading this back, I wonder whether I'm pushing work difficulties while Joe is talking about personal relationships. In her initial session, I got a sense about what went wrong with her ex and her humiliation about work friendships, so my focus, perhaps mistakenly, was to go where I sensed more grit on the one hand, and I wanted to see what kind of elasticity of thought she had come out of the fault issue. Susie. Yes, I understand, but it was your livelihood and your form of expression and your form of community. Joe. Yeah, I guess it was. Yeah, it was my community. Susie. It was where you had a foothold or you felt you belonged. Joe. Yeah, I guess right now, though, the only things I can think about, people say it's vulgar to talk about money. Well, you shouldn't talk about money. Susie. Uh huh. Joe. And I feel like there is a reason people talk about money. It is because they don't have it, and it's very different if you have got money. You don't have to think about it. Suddenly, when you are in a situation where you know you are having to pick up 5p pieces of the floor to buy yourself a banana or to put towards getting something, you are thinking about money all the time and the lack of it, and it rules your life. And I feel like I'm overwhelmed by it because I have always done the jobs that I have chosen or jobs that have spoken to me, spoken to my heart. But now I feel like I don't know what my heart or gut is ever telling me because I feel overwhelmed by not having anywhere to live. Susie. Uh-huh. Joe. Um and I don't feel like there's any space for what I loved, which was being part of a company, which was acting and investing and exploring and being inside someone else's head. And now I'm just inside my own head all the time, and it's not a very nice place to be. Susie. Uh huh. Joe. Ah, I want to get myself out of this rut, and there's only so long, really, I can be that friend who stays on everyone's sofa. It makes me feel pretty worthless, if I'm honest. But I feel like I'm ready to, whereas before I felt very angry. Susie. Uh huh. Joe. And I don't feel that like that anymore. I feel like something's got to shift. Susie. Well, that's an interesting shift, isn't it? Because it means, difficult as it is, that you are not fighting against the idea that you have got to find a way to look after yourself. Joe. Yeah, I feel like I need to take responsibility for something. Susie. And how you're going to do that in the short term and how you're going to figure out how to manage economically so you are not picking up 5p pieces. Joe. Yeah, I know, and that's the reality. Susie. Uh-huh. Joe. Or anything, 2p, 1p. Oh yeah, I think it's difficult because I can't. I don't have the fallback of my parent. I'm an only child. My mom is not in any stable situation herself to be able to help emotionally or practically. Susie. Well, I think it's very hard to be orphaned emotionally and financially. Joe. Yeah. Susie. I'm not sure how to take which steps, and I think it would be helpful for you to be in therapy. Joe. Yeah. Susie. Yeah. Joe. I think so. Susie. Because it is a way to stop just going around the same. Joe. Yeah, I feel like I am in a. Susie. A loop. Joe. A loop that I can't get out of, and I need to take that step for someone. Susie. I think you have already taken the step by getting back in contact and accepting. I'm not where I want to be, but I'm really vulnerable and I need some help, some real help with this. Joe. Yeah. Susie. And I know I have to do a lot of trying and thinking and challenging myself. Joe. Yeah. Susie. And I need somebody walking beside me to be helpful me to think and do and work on that. Joe. Yeah, that, because also I feel like it's got to be now because I feel like I'm turning into somebody that I never was, or that Susie. Disappointment and loss being evicted from work produce very difficult feelings. You have mentioned the word cynical a couple of times, and I suppose you mean you are so hurt and you don't want to be cynical and bitter. You actually want to use your energy in a way that begins to calm you so that you have got some to take forward. So, look, let me think about this, Joe. Joe. Okay. Susie, I will get back to you. Joe. Yeah. Susie, within the week. Joe, with a suggestion of, yes. Susie, yes, have a think. Just let it sit with me. I'll have a think and then I'll see if that place or that person. Joe, uh huh. Susie, can find a way to see you. Okay? Joe, yeah. Susie, okay, all right. Joe, thank you. Susie, okay. Joe, oh, just to check, do I pay for the session? Susie, it's okay. Don't you worry about that. Joe, okay, thank you. Susie, okay, all right. So give me a week. Joe, yeah, sure. You have got my number, right? Yeah, of course. Susie, okay. There is something warming about Joe having made contact again. I feel optimistic on her part. I know it is going to be a tough struggle whether or not she lands some theatre work soon. She's facing her defeats and the pain of her present, which has excluded her from the world of many of her peers. Like many actors, the characters she played helped her with a search for and an expression of her identity. And without the role to play, she is forced into a confrontation with the confusing parts of herself. There is a scandalous lack of provision for talking therapies within the NHS as posts are cut back and back. There is no parity for mental health service despite governmental rhetoric and voluntary services are stretched. The private therapy sector within the psychoanalytic and Jungian wing has always held to the principle of providing therapy at very low cost, which means that practitioners will often have a few hours a week set aside for a person like Joe. Okay, that brings us to the end of case for Joe. She was seeking for the first time therapy, and because of ethical dilemmas, she couldn't take up, but that's a way to go. You understand and you refer them to someone else. That's great. Okay, we will read the next case of Maureen in our next reading. Bye bye for now. If you have any kind of recommendations, suggestions, anything at all, feedback, positive, negative, all are welcome. You can reach out to me in the comment section of the video you're viewing or in the community section. Bye bye for now. Keep reading. Take care. Bye.